What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Jenny Grimsley here, and you are in store for another episode talking former athletes and what the hell we're doing with our lives now, right? Because we're not just the people who retired and said, you know what, I'm going to become average, right? This show, my articles, all of the content that I create is for you guys. It's for the ones who want to move and compete and feel like themselves without making fitness their entire personality. That's my job because that's the career choice and path that I've gone down. But, if not, it doesn't need to be your entire personality. So if you're new here, I'm glad you found me. And if you've been listening for a while, you already know that I don't do a ton of fluff. I don't do gimmicks. And I don't pretend that a 12-week transformation is the only thing you need as a 30 to 40-year-old former athlete, right? You've done the fitness thing before, just in a different context. So now we're going to talk about what it means to be an adult trying to be fit with some miles on our wheels. All right. So probably the last 10 days or so has been pretty busy. I actually attended this event called Summer Strong over in Lexington, South Carolina. So about a 2-hour drive for me from Charleston. And if you've never heard of Sorinex, it's a fitness equipment company that started throwing this birthday party for the founder, and it's turned into an event attended by some of the strongest human beings you'll ever see in one place. And I don't just mean physically strong people. Yes, there is a lot of that. There's a lot of heavy weights being picked up, but I'm more so referring to the kind of strong that comes from surviving something hard, right? From choosing to rebuild when you didn't have to, right? Some of the people who took the stage, because there's presentations, there's vendors, there's competitions, there's all of this stuff. But the thing this year that really stood out to me were the people who took the stage, and two of them actually lost limbs. One serving for our country, and the other is a former All-American turned strength coaches, and both of them survived horrific accidents, but they decided that they weren't done with life yet. So if you haven't read up about Katie Guillory, if she's just not on your radar, she's one of the strength coaches down at LSU. Go look into her. I mean, as a female athlete, someone who competed at a high level, was running a career at a really high level, and then to have something as bad as losing a leg happen, especially in a field where you have to be physical and active and on your feet, I think she's an inspiration for anyone, especially for us. I mean, I consider myself a forever athlete, and probably you do as well. And so as I'm listening to her and I'm listening to Nick Laverly speak, I kept coming back to one question that relates to you all. And I know I've been talking about what workouts look like, but have I actually shown you how to make them stick? Because the thing that both of these individuals were able to get back to quickly was their physical practice. Now, they could have laid up and said, you know what, life is over. I got to completely switch gears, leave the military, exit the strength conditioning world. But that's not what they did, because they knew that physical practice had such an impact on their life, especially as chaotic as life was around those events. And this is really part of the life experience that nobody talks about. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit more today is, right, how do we build a routine that fits where you are in whatever season of life you're in, okay? So I want you to picture something for a second, okay? A gal, right? She played college basketball, maybe Division I. She played in the NCAA, maybe Division II. That doesn't really matter. But what matters is that she was an athlete, she trained hard, and she knows and knew what discipline felt like, right? Now that athlete has turned into or transitioned into a women's college basketball coach, as many of my friends have done over the years, right? She's recruiting high school kids, managing the NIL and the portal, having conversations with parents, having conversations with coaches, God bless, having conversations with agents, right? Also sitting and studying film, because coaching is not just about the on-court stuff, it's about the off-court preparation that you do. Now you're flying or on the bus for hours on end to a game, right? You're driving to tournaments to watch these high school kids that you've been recruiting, or these NIL kids. You're managing home visits, right? You're handling academic check-ins. And depending on the size of institution that she's working at, some of this is probably done directly by her, and some of it is probably done by people who report to her. So she's still managing all of this stuff, right? Think about, now let's flip to on court. You're motivating 18 to 23-year-olds at 6 in the morning to get their shit together, but then having to flip that switch and go home and be a functioning human being with relationships and, God knows, probably a dog, because all of us have had dogs at some point, right? Now, notice I haven't said anything about working out. And it's not that she doesn't know how to work out, because she's been training her whole life. But the question becomes, when does she actually do those workouts that she knows she needs to do? And that's what we're going to get into today. Like, using her as our example, I want to talk about how we would build a training schedule that works across the full year. So the article I wrote this last week talked about what a week would look like. But I want to take that a step further, because I think that's where we get into trouble. You can do anything for a couple weeks at a time, but when life throws you a curveball, what do you do? And this is the pattern that I see over and over, right? One of my clients comes to me or finds me online, and they have some version of the same story. I used to be in great shape. I know I can still do this. I just can't seem to make it happen on my own. And a lot of times they think it's my fault. I don't have the discipline. I don't have the motivation. I don't have the time, right? And in reality, it's not any of those things, right? What actually happened is that their training structure disappeared the moment they walked across that stage, the moment the last buzzer went off their senior year. When you stop playing, the structure goes with it. Unless you step into the next phase of your athletic career, you step into the next season of your life, which is why a lot of the stuff you hear me talk about is the second season, because that's where we are in our real jobs, our real careers, right? We're not competing for trophies and awards anymore. We're competing to make a living, to support ourselves and our families. So when you were playing, someone else built that system for you. Someone told you when to show up, what to do, how hard to push through the pain. You didn't really have to think about it, right? You just had to show up and do it and suffer through. And that probably jaded a fair amount of us. And I know a couple of the players that I've talked to over the last few years who have come out have said it's even worse at this point, where everything is so tightly structured. And now you've got the NIL pressure, right? There's a lot that goes into being a student athlete that people just don't get, right? But once you graduate, once you finish your eligibility, now that schedule that was once dictated to you and the intensity managed is all yours. And the goal at this point is for you to build a schedule that survives your life, which, if you think about it from a skill-based standpoint, we never really built that skill as student athletes because it was done for us, right? And the mistake that many of us make when we try to get back in and train like we're still competing is that we try to do the same stuff that we were doing. We're able to do it for a few weeks, but then we hit a hard week of workouts, or we run into travel, or your kids get sick, my dogs get sick, and the whole schedule that you thought you were able to maintain falls apart. What ends up happening next is that actually a lot of nothing, right? You wait 6 months, start this process all over again. You try to do this over and over and over, and it's a lot of stopping and starting because life gets in the way. You don't know how to navigate when that curveball gets thrown. But if you think about your body, and this is interesting, right? We think about our body as an investment account. Now that we're working, we've got some retirement money, hopefully in a 401k or IRA, or, this is not a financial advice show, But hopefully you're putting money away so that it can start to compound and work for you so that when you are ready to retire, whatever age you decide to do that, you've got something to fall back on. Or if you run into a hard time in life, you can always pull money out of that account. And your body works the same way. Rather than trying to get quick money out of, say, a crypto trade, you're banking money into a retirement account that works for you, which is the same thing as your workouts. Your slow, consistent investments of time and energy into your workouts starts to build something real, a body that actually works for you rather than against you, right? And so the goal here isn't to do a 3-week, let's crush it and then be crippled, right? The goal is to still be training to get stronger 3 years from now, or even 33 years from now, right? So let's talk about this example of our basketball coach and how we're going to kind of take this retirement investment approach to training rather than the crypto day trader get rich quick scheme, right? For this avatar, right, let's just imagine she's been in the sport long enough to know what consistency actually looks like, right? She's been coaching, she's been doing this, and she's been coaching her players to do something similar, but now she's not coaching her players, she's coaching her own life, okay? So let me give you a picture of what the average year looks like for a women's basketball coach. You would think there's an off season, but there's not. There's just phases of really busy and kind of busy, right? And each of these has its own stressors and different ways of being, right? So in the summer, right? So let's think about right now, going into June, July is the big recruiting month if you're still recruiting high school kids, and then into early August, right? So the summer, we'll lump that in together. You've got basketball camps running, you've got club tournaments, you've got all of this stuff. You're bouncing across the U.S. looking at players, but also touching base with your kids on campus. All right, so the intensity here is actually manageable. Yes, there's a lot of travel, but you're typically staying in hotels that have gyms. It's warmer, so you can get outside, and this is usually where some visits to campus start to happen. But there are dead periods where there's less going on, where you can't have contact with prospects. So there's some planning and organizing and, maybe running some open gyms, opening the gym for some of the current players. But here, there's no games to prep for, no film to cut, unless you're, trying to recruit kids out of the portal. Okay, and typically that window is closed because that's more of a late spring thing. Okay, so the summer is actually our coach's best window to start to build a training base. Okay, so that means we're building a decent level of strength. We're actually just creating the routine. Then when school starts back and fall rolls around, so think August, September, October, that's your preseason period, right? Players are back on campus, practices ramp up. The first games are usually in early November for some exhibitions. You get into Thanksgiving and there's probably a classic or a tournament. And you also have the, early signing period. So there's still some recruiting that's happening. So this is actually a pretty busy part of the year, right? So travel starts to pick up. Film study picks up. You're probably traveling for games, but also traveling to watch, kids play. Her schedule in this case just went from kind of loose and structured but manageable to really full in a very short period of time. Okay, so we go from preseason to in-season. So that's November to February, March if you're lucky, right? And this tends to be the hardest stretch. 2 to 3 games a week. Every opponent is not looked past, so you're looking at film, you're doing a scouting report, a game plan, right? You're working as a staff to make sure that your team is in the best position to win. And oh, by the way, recruiting doesn't stop just because you're playing games, right? There's still outreach to players, to coaches, highlight tape, like all the things that typically go on. And if you're at a smaller institution, you're probably also checking grades. All the things are happening in this in-season, not just the actual coaching part of things, okay? So then that takes us to the spring. Season's over, you're getting into postseason workouts. Coach might get a week or two here and there, depending on the program and how it's run, but you don't get to take time completely off, right? You're back out recruiting for the spring period. You've got, the portal opening after the NCAA's close out, right? So there's a lot of things happening, and you're watching hundreds of players and your own players to figure out who's worthy of a scholarship and a place on the team. And that's the year. It goes by pretty quick, and there's a lot to be done, and I'm sure there's pieces of it that I've missed. So with all of that going on, how do you create a routine that keeps you at your best throughout those 4 seasons? Well, in the article we talked about the 3 pillars of health and fitness, right? There's strength, stamina, and mobility. Those are the 3 absolutes that you need to work into your routine so that your body will carry you through these busy and busier seasons of life, right? So a good weekly routine only needs to do those 3 things: build strength, build a little bit of an engine, and maintain mobility. One of the biggest things that can knock a coach off the court is an injury. I know one of my college coaches tore their Achilles at one point. Some of my other friends have had rotator cuff surgeries from just missing a ball that came off the rim funny, right? Being backed into, there's knee injuries, right? So the stronger you are, the likelihood that those things happen is less, right? So strength is the foundation, especially for our crowd as we're getting older. We're protecting bone density, we're maintaining muscle mass, really just keeping your body functional and capable of anything that your job throws at you, right? And the stronger you are in the big compound movements, the better your body is going to work, and sometimes more importantly, look, right? Because now basketball has become a fashion show on the sideline. So I want you to also look good while you're coaching well, okay? And our example coach here knows the coaching side from coaching it. She just may not know how to apply it to herself, all right? So strength, yes, she knows how to lift. She did that in college. But we want to make sure that she's hitting movements that fit her body well, not just the things that, all right, yeah, I can squat and deadlift and clean and do all that stuff. That probably isn't what's best for her right now. And I'll talk about this here more in just a second. The second thing is your engine, right? Having the stamina, right? This doesn't need to be the ability to run 17s on the 5 minutes and do all the conditioning stuff that we used to do. She's already on her feet in practice. She's walking around campus doing class checks, right? So some of this conditioning work that we did as athletes gets replaced by the lower intensity, just general activity that we get throughout our day. Or the opposite of it, if your ass is glued to a chair because you are watching film, finding ways just to get some steps in to get you moving. Because as you're moving and your blood starts to flow, you actually get better clarity of mind. Meaning, maybe the nuance that you missed on the film review the first time, you see it the second time if you're watching film after doing a workout or doing a little bit of interval work or just walking on the treadmill while you're watching film, right? It can be as simple as that. You get it done, you check the box, you move on because you're feeling better, okay? And then the last one, the third, and not necessarily the last one, but the third thing to include in this weekly situation is mobility. Now, some folks will go the yoga route and say, you know what, I just need that mindful practice so that I can go back to the chaos of life. And that's fantastic. That checks the mobility box. But a lot of times that takes longer than you have time for. And so mobility can get easily woven into your workouts. So if I look at these 3 things, I can do them as standalone individual things, or I can combine them into a comprehensive workout that I do a couple of times a week and still be able to check the box on all of them. That's the goal. That's what creates the flexibility here. So for mobility, you don't need to sit and stretch for hours on end. You need to hit a warm-up. You need to do some extended range exercises. And then you do a little bit of stretching if you feel like you absolutely need to, but it's not totally necessary, okay? And so when we look at these three factors, 2 to 4 sessions per week covers all three of them. Like I said, you can combine them. You can do a mixed session. Mobility layers into strength really nicely. Strength kind of can layer in with some of the conditioning work. And we can create a workout that looks like a warm-up, a strength session, and a quick interval burst, and get all three done within the hour, maybe even 45 minutes, depending on how long you take between each segment of that workout. And then this starts to look much more manageable. Now, I'm not going to talk about the nutrition and lifestyle factors that go into this, but the accountability piece is huge. What you schedule gets done. So if you're really good about scheduling your day and setting aside, I've got an hour here for film, I've got an hour here for our staff meeting, I've got an hour here for my workout. The question will never be whether or not this avatar, our coach, actually has time to train. The question will start to become, okay, where does this training live in each phase of her year? Because we know sometimes are busier than others. So let's talk about the summer, because that's where we started our year. And this is probably most relevant at this point. Summer is going to be your best window. You don't have as much on your plate to do. So this is where we can break up our 3 days of strength training, maybe 2 days of cardio, and layer in mobility on both of those types of workouts, right? So maybe it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday for lifting. Maybe you do it as a staff. Or you just get up before you get to the office and do it there. Or if you prefer to work out in the afternoon, take the hour, head over to the weight room, wave at your strength coach, get to work done, and then get back to your desk, right? It doesn't really matter what days this lands on, as long as you're consistent in doing it. And maybe, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday is a better schedule, or, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because at least you're going to be on campus if you're out in July, for example, recruiting these longer tournaments. You can at least get 2 to 3 days of work in. Then you've got your cardio days. Maybe these are the weekend days that you do, whether you're out, taking your dog on a long hike, you're doing a bike ride. If you are traveling for recruiting, this is where you get up just 30 minutes earlier, knock out 30 minutes of cardio, of walking or intervals, and then head to the gym to sit and watch, kids play all day, right? This is where you have to invest in yourself a little bit, because then you're going to show up better. Yes, watching and evaluating players is stressful, but the even more stressful thing is sitting on your butt doing that, right? So making sure that you're investing in yourself before you give that energy out into the world is huge, right? And so if we think about this schedule, that's Monday through Friday of work, or Monday through Thursday, Friday off, and some cardio on the weekends, right? Whatever this schedule is that she can commit to, this is where you start to build the base. This is where she's making those daily deposits into her body's account that she's going to be able to draw back on once the season starts and the schedules get a lot tighter, right? So this is your best window for getting stronger, getting leaner, and working on some mobility and stress management, right? This is also where you can start to make some mental shifts, right? You have to treat yourself as a priority, or else you're not going to be able to treat your priorities as they should be treated, right? So put your stuff in the calendar and treat it just like you would a call with a recruit in the portal, or high school coach, or someone who's possibly going to be an All-American. You make that same commitment to yourself, okay? Then we move into the preseason, right? So summer's over. We've built the base. Practices start, your schedule gets a little bit tighter, but what changes? Well, the strength training doesn't really have to go anywhere. You can still get in 3 days of strength training. It just can't drop to 0. So if some weeks you're a little bit busier because you've got team stuff going on, ideally you're still sticking with 3 sessions, right? The cardio is the piece that can get moved around, because if your kids are back, you're probably on the court doing individual work, you're moving around, you're much more active from that standpoint. That's perfect. Then you don't need the longer walks or longer cardio sessions, because you're up and being active. Now, you still probably want to keep maybe one more higher intensity day, 10 to 15 minutes after a good warm up. You're in, you're out, you've moved on, right? You need to just be effective. And then mobility just continues to get layered into the strength work, right? You just have to remember, as your schedule gets busier, stress goes up. Training is stressful in and of itself. So we don't want to drop stress completely. We still want to have that buffer, but maybe we bring the amount of stress that we're adding into the system down so that we balance the stress from work with the stress from training, right? So at this point, right, we're building this avatar, this coach, and prepping her for the actual season when time is going to be even tighter, right? So we're creating some flexibility around what has been able to do, but not losing all of the base that we built over the summer, right? So being able to get up, take 10-minute walks after meals, any of those things that helps to keep the body from deteriorating, because you actually want to be able to peak once you get into season, because season is your maintenance mode. Shit is crazy. Like, there's stuff going on. Maybe you're traveling cross country. If you're in the ACC and you've got to go from the East Coast to the West Coast or vice versa, that's a lot of work and stress on your body. So the goal, once you get into season, is a mindset shift into, I just need to maintain what I've built up to this point. I don't need you focusing on new gains, and your kids are going to be doing the same thing, actually, right? So if you think about the work they're doing with their strength coach, they're still training with high intent, but they're training to not lose the strength that they've gained over the summer and the preseason, okay? So 1 to 2 sessions a week is all you need here. Focused, efficient, not trying to do marathon stuff. And one of the coolest things that I've seen more recently than I have probably in the last 10 to 15 years are staff workouts. And when you get the staff working out, you sweat together, you grind together, it just starts to build a little bit more camaraderie, a little bit more connection. It's typically led by your strength coach. A pregame lift is probably one of the coolest things I see the University of South Carolina women do. Molly Benetti does an awesome job of getting that entire staff together. They get a quick pump in, they get a flex for the gram, and then they're off to coach their absolute butts off. And that's what we want, right? We want you to feel really good going into game day. Not beat down, not beat up, right? Because you're on the road. You're at home. You got late nights. You got early mornings, right? You want a body that will support you. And so continuing to layer on stress just ain't going to do that for you, okay? And I think this is probably the most important thing. I want you to internalize this. A 30-minute workout that you actually do is worth 10 times more than that perfect 90-minute workout you never did. Okay, so it doesn't have to be much. 30 minutes, in, out, sick pump, walk onto the court, you're ready to go. Because right now, during season, showing up is the skill. And we've built this skill up to this point. The performance that doesn't matter, right? These aren't ideal conditions. We want you to show up so that you can be your best. And when you do have those rare pockets where maybe you've got a bye week in your schedule, you get the extra day off, you can actually take a little bit of downtime so that you're not burning out. But the bigger the base that you're able to build in the off season, in that summer, and continue to compound it in the preseason, maintain it in the season, you're actually able to avoid getting sick. You have a much more robust way of thinking and managing stress, and you actually burn out less. So if you do make it to the postseason, it's not because you've run yourself into the ground, it's because you've hit a peak and been able to maintain it, right? When you can get an extra session in, you do it, but it's not necessary. So remember, 1 to 2 workouts a week, a little bit of cardio just to keep the blood flowing, especially after long bus or plane trips. That's probably one of the best things that I found as I was traveling for one of my previous jobs, of just get out, get the legs moving, and then get on with your day. It doesn't have to be hard. It just needs to be done. Okay? And then when we get to the spring, this is where the season is over. You've said your goodbyes. You've done your end of year banquets, right? Whether you made the tournament or not, what does our coach need to do? She needs to rest, maybe for a week or two, just to kind of bring some of the cortisol levels back down, get back into the routine of shopping, meal prepping, all of the things that support her body. And we do it not necessarily for the body, but more so for the mind, right? So once the coach takes that week to just get away from the building, spend some time with her dog or her family or whatever she's got going, then we get into rebuilding, right? So April is pretty crazy, right? You're recruiting, you got portal stuff, right? You're not only rebuilding a team, you're rebuilding your routine and your structure, okay? But instead of going back to zero, we're just going back to what we were able to do in the preseason. So postseason and preseason for our coach avatar look pretty much the same. 2 to 3 strength days, getting in a day, maybe 2 days of cardio. And remember, the cardio can be 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be anything long, extended, unless you're like, you know what, I'm going to go run a marathon this spring, which, goodbye you, but you got a pretty busy job that's going to take hours away from. So, maybe let's start by rebuilding so that when you get to May, June, July, you're ready to start building again. So you rebuild your structure and routine in the spring, and you really do your deep dive, because remember, summer is where you have the ability to progress your base even more. And that's the year, right? That's the loop that you follow. In the summer, you build. In the fall, you keep that structure, but give yourself a little grace because things are starting to get busy. Once you're in season, you maintain it, and then spring is your reset. Then you go right back into summer and start building again, right? So the thing about this coach example is she's not going to look like an Instagram trainer. She doesn't need to. That's not what her entire thing is about, right? She needs to feel strong. She needs to feel capable. She probably also wants to feel athletic, because now she is a role model for what her players should look like and act like. So you model what you need to do to take care of yourself over time. The players and your peers start to pick up on it, right? So this coach walks into year 40, 42, 45, 50, and she's able to move. She's able to do things she enjoys. Hell, maybe she even picks up golf and is crushing it there, right? That's the goal, is the ability to live your life in a way where you feel capable, not beat down because you work in an industry that requires a grind. The grind should be fun. This is the work that supports that grind, right? So everything I just described, the phases, the structure, the built-in flexibility, right? None of it works if you don't have a starting point. And so if you've been off for a while, or you've been randomly like stacking workouts together with no real plan behind them, right? You need to go through a reset first. And I've been thinking about this for a while, and I want you to tell me if this is something you would be interested in. So I need you to shoot me a DM on Instagram if this is something that you're like, wait a minute, that's exactly what I need. And the mindset for me on this is like, I want to provide something that is valuable to my peers out there who are still coaching, who are working full-time jobs, right? You don't have to be a college coach for this, but like the idea is you want to look like you still know ball, right? That's the thing. You still want to look and move and feel like an athlete. So I was thinking, like, what would be the perfect get back on track program for someone going through this to set that initial baseline? And so the thought is 8 weeks, right, of structure and building up to a sustainable training level. That's kind of what all this stuff is back here. I've been trying to figure out what it is that this program would look like, because I want you to start looking and feeling like yourself again without destroying yourself. Okay, so the first few weeks, you're going to reestablish your movement patterns, reestablish just putting the time into your schedule for this, right? So we're going to start building the habits first. It's not going to look like anything sexy. It ain't P90X. It ain't CrossFit. It's none of this hardcore 75 hard stuff. It's you doing things that you're actually able to do and committing to this for 8 weeks, okay? So the first 4 weeks is really about building the routine and the habits, and then the last 4 weeks is about starting to get stronger, starting to layer in that cardio, right? Starting to build a base for the phases that you are going to go through later in the year. Now, if you're a college coach, it's exactly what I just laid out here, right? You want this base to be able to get you through season so it doesn't feel like you're beat to shit by the end of the season. If you're a busy executive, if you're working full-time, or you're a full-time stay-at-home mom with a couple kids, like this would work for you as well, right? So the nutrition and habit coaching is built in there, but the way that I think about habits and changing your body and mindset, there's 3 things. There's the training, there's the nutrition, and then there's the accountability piece, right? So everything is going to start with training. We need to get you moving your body a little bit more. It's the easiest thing to implement. Nutrition can be tricky because there's a lot of things going on. Then we start talking about what you can add into your diet that will help you along the way. And then the accountability piece is making sure you actually do the thing, right? So that's why I want to gauge your interest on this. Of like, would this be something that you might be interested in? Okay. And if it is, shoot me a DM. I'm on the interwebs, right? At g.gperiod. Let me know if you're interested. And we'll see what happens from there, right? Because I haven't built it yet, but it's obviously top of mind, and I want to make sure that it's something that you like. So after that, that's all I got for this week, right? So remember, your training needs to build strength, stamina, and help you with mobility, right? A couple sessions a week. You don't need to be extreme with this, right? It's a framework that actually fits your life. That's what we're going for here, right? So what you do in the summer might look a little bit different than what you do in February, but that's by design, not by mistake, right? So if you found this useful, share it with someone who's trying to figure out how to stay athletic while the rest of their life is happening. And if you haven't yet, please make sure you subscribe on here on Substack. I'm also on YouTube and also on Instagram, right? So last week's article went deeper into this actual week of training structure. Next week, we've got something special for you, so make sure you tune back in. And as always, I'm Jenny. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me, and we'll talk soon.